Freedom for my people is urgent. Tell me, who are you serving? Tell them all the facts and they curl. Guess the truth is a burden. Wipe the shit out like detergent. Either that or we burn it. 'Cause freedom for my people is urgent. Think you know we deserve it. News come, news goes. Till we fire when the screen's closed. News come, news goes. Till we fire when the screen's frozen. News come, news goes. Till we fire when they won't show it. News come, news goes. Till we fight till the lights on. I see the future. I see so clearly. I see the vision inside the children. I see so clearly. I see the future is green and lovely, is waiting on me. News come, news goes. Till we fight when the screen's closed. Till we fight. News come, news goes. Till we fight when the screen's frozen. News come, news goes. Till we fight when they won't show it. News come, news goes. Till we fight till the lights see the future. I see so clearly. It's green and lovely. It's waiting on me. Freedom from my people is urgent. And you know you deserve it. Tell me, who are you serving? Don't keep it under the surface. Freedom for my people is urgent. But we can't get discouraged. Peace has a price, hope it's worth it. Tell us be quiet, then disturb us. And don't be nervous when they see us switch lanes and swerve it.
We'll get started. Thanks everyone so much for being here. We're really excited to have this discussion and get started for the second teach-in of our Breaking Silos teach-in series. We wanted to spend a couple of moments orienting folks to the space. So I'm going to pass now to Ron to share with us how to access Spanish interpretation.
Hey, thank you so much, Miriam. Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Mi nombre es Ron García Fogarty. Estoy aquí con mi cointérprete, Karin Ganter, de la Cooperativa de Justicia de Lenguaje Tilde. Hi, everyone. My name is Ron, and I'm here with Karin, my co-interpreter, and we are with Tilde Language Justice Cooperative. Pueden ver en su pantalla cómo acceder a la interpretación. Si están conectados con su computadora, van a hacer clic en el botón que dice interpretación y luego seleccionan español. Si están conectados con su teléfono, primero hacen clic en el botón que dice más, luego interpretación de idiomas y por último español. Si usted es bilingüe, entiende tanto inglés como español, no necesita conectarse al canal, solamente si desea escuchar la interpretación. So you can see on the screen a slide that shows instructions for joining a language channel. If you are bilingual, you do not need to join a channel, only if you would like to listen in either English or in Spanish when somebody speaks a language different than the one you understand. So if you would like to listen to interpreting into English when somebody speaks up in Spanish, that won't be the case in this webinar. But you would select interpretation, then you select English. And if you're connected with your phone, you'll click on more and then language interpretation, and then you can select the language. Un recordatorio final que los panelistas, por favor, hablen a un paso moderado para que podamos hacer un buen trabajo interpretando. Just a final reminder to the panelists to speak at a moderate pace so we can do a good job interpreting. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Before we get started, want to remind folks that this is a webinar style, so only the speakers will have video and mic access. But we would love for y'all to be as engaged as possible, to hear your thoughts and feelings and things that resonate with you in the chat. The chat is available for comment or to affirm anything that's been said. You can also use the Q&A function to ask any questions. We'll get to the Q&A at the end, and we encourage folks to share. So as we do that, encouraging folks to share, we also gently offer that all of us come to this space with different experiences and ask that we approach these conversations with respect and grace for each other. Additionally, in order to foster a space where folks feel as comfortable as possible sharing and engaging, we will deny entry to Otters and other AI transcription tools. If you're kicked out, please rejoin the webinar from a non-Otter AI account. We will, however, follow up with all registrants with a link for the recording to this teach-in. Lastly, we have closed captioning available. You can access that by clicking the 3 dots under More and selecting Closed Captioning. If there's anything that you need during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to Arnita in the chat who can support. And now I'm going to pass it to Mickey to explain our play space. Thanks, Mickey.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for session 2 of Breaking Silos. If you were here for our first session, you know that we have also incorporated a participant play space filled with activities as well as opportunities to respond in real time to what our incredible experts and panel share. So in a moment, you'll see the play space link in the chat. This is an interactive Canva for you to be able to utilize and access, as well as to continue to build this movement beyond this space. We encourage you to drop links, event flyers, readings, and to continue to contribute to our Liberation Library. Happy play, and really looking forward to seeing y'all in the play space today. Thank you.
Great. So we will get into it. So hello again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this space with us. My name is Miriam Mack. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Campaigns and Advocacy Director and Senior Legal Counsel at Movement for Family Power. We are excited to be here with you all to build on the work that we've been doing since last fall to break silos in our movement and ground in the fact that reproductive justice has always included the right to safely parent our children with the resources we need to thrive. We know that the demonization, criminalization, and separation of birthing people and their babies is a core feature of the drug war, and that in many ways, the foster system was ground zero for Black families and Black communities. We also know that the so-called healthcare system was complicit in the drug war's project of separating Black families and destabilizing Black communities. Today, we want to go deeper, and we want to examine not only how the drug war made seeking help inseparable from experiencing surveillance and coercion and criminalization, but also how and why the pre-existing design of our healthcare system made it a particularly useful tool for the drug war. And we also want to take time to dream together. We want to talk about our vision of wellness and liberation for Black folks and for parents who use drugs, and explore what it means to live and practice abolition now. So before we get into it, I want to introduce our amazing panelists. First, we have Chanel, who is a prominent health policy advocate known for her transformative contributions to reproductive and maternal health equity across city, state, and federal platforms. As a founder and president of Ancient Song, Inc., Chanel has led vital policy initiatives to address racial disparities in maternal care, advocating for Black and Latina communities, and championing reproductive justice. Welcome, Chanel. Dinah Ortiz Adams, who was not able to join us today because of some emergency that came up, is a thought leader, organizer, and activist who has been working on behalf of people who use drugs and pregnant and parenting people for over 2 decades. She serves as a board member of North Carolina Survivors Union and is on the current leadership team of the National Survivors Union. And we are sending Dinah our love and our thoughts. And please do check out Dinah's work. She's written a tremendous amount on these issues, and we are thinking about you, Dinah. Karen Thompson is a director of litigation at Pregnancy Justice, where she leads a team of attorneys advocating for women and all those pregnancy able who are prosecuted because of their pregnancies or pregnancy outcomes, whether that be birth, a miscarriage or stillbirth, or an abortion. And Kima Joy Taylor is a pediatrician and public health expert. She co-founded Doing Right by Birth and founded Anka Consulting, leveraging her experience from roles at Open Societies Foundation, Baltimore City Health Department, and as a practicing pediatrician at a DC FQHC. And as well as her policy work for Senator Sarbanes and her research on health equity to advance equitable access to and outcomes from integrated and equitable healthcare solutions. So thank you all for being here today. We're really excited about this conversation. And to jump right in and get started, I want to toss it to you, Karen, to get the ball rolling. How did the drug war make seeking help inseparable from experiencing surveillance, coercion, and criminalization, especially for Black folks and for parents who use drugs?
Well, I'm going to start with my cliche. First of all, thank you for having me and allowing me to be in community with these amazing people on this call. But I want to start with my cliche quote, because I say it every time I speak in public, but I think it shows where we are and how we got here. For the olds on the call, there is a man named John Ehrlichman who worked for Richard Nixon in the early 70s. And this is what he said a few months before he died in an interview to The Nation. You want to know what this war on drugs is really all about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had 2 enemies, the anti-war left and Black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Right? So if anybody was in any way confused about why, as you said earlier, Miriam, the kind of this gathering, this coming together of criminalization and drug use and pregnancy is happening, it has nothing to do with the interests of the child, the life of the child, the health of the mother, fetal health, maternal health, none of these things. It has got to do with kind of destroying communities and destroying families and using as an excuse drug use to justify the constant carceral response to our communities, right? So one of the things that we see at Pregnancy Justice is that all of these laws that are supposed to be about helping the child, addressing folks' need, if there is one, for support with regard to a substance use disorder, we see that there are laws that go from place A to place C. Things that were supposed to be about health are turned on their head and used to pathologize people. And so things that a doctor would say, and I think Dr. Parrott is on this phone call, and I always make her say things to the community because she's at the forefront of everything. But what you see is that it has nothing to do with providing health. It is just about turning laws into the weapons of incarceration. And sometimes that's done because the fetus is given legal rights, right? Sometimes it's a fetal personhood question, and sometimes it's just a question of how all of those things combine into a racist act. One of our kind of leading cases is Ferguson v. City of Charleston, where we saw Black women being criminalized at the behest of the hospital, working in cahoots with law enforcement to justify literally pulling people out of their beds and taking them into jails because of substance use. But again, it has nothing to do with that. We know now, 30 years later, that the crack baby myth is a myth. We know now that, and I think Ms. Taylor will talk about this later, but what we are associating with health is not health, and the carceral response that we are applying is actually breaking down people's ability to be healthy. So if there's anything that I really want to make sure we take away today, it's just that these ideas, this kind of medical idea, this carceral idea, and this legal idea are being kind of put together in this braid that they shouldn't be put together in. A health response should remain a health response. A legal response should not be a carceral response, but that needs to be clearer. And the way that our communities are able to thrive require all of these things to be disentangled.
Thank you. And that sort of brings up for me also just thinking about how we saw with even sort of intersecting with the drug war, the family policing system and CAPTA. I mean, one of the prime functions of the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act was to take systems that were supposed to be systems of support and systems of care and turn them into systems of surveillance, where literally as a caretaker, as a parent, as a Black caretaker, as an Indigenous caretaker, there is nowhere that you can go that they're not surveilling you and viewing you through a lens, like you said, Karen, of pathology. And this makes me think a little bit of conversations that we've had, Kima and Chanel, about just some of the assumptions that sort of lie in this question, right? The idea that surveillance, coercion, and criminalization, that those things being inseparable from seeking care was actually brought on by the drug war. And I feel like I've heard both you, Kima, and Chanel say it started way before that. And care for Black and brown bodies has been criminalized for a long time, both how we have created alternative structures of care for ourselves, but also when people attempt to access care. I just want to wonder if either of you want to sort of say a few things about that.
Yeah, I would love to. And then since Karen started, I'm going to start with a quote of my own, because I think this is breaking silos in reproductive justice. And I really think we need to break even broader silos. But it's this quote by Yaa Gyasi from a book called Transcendent Kingdom. And I start most of my talks this way, because this is what we have to do. And she says, I mean progress in the sense of the natural way in which learning something new requires getting rid of something old. Like how discovering that the world is round means that you can no longer hang on to the idea that you may one day fall off the edge of the earth. And now that you've learned something you thought was true was never true at all, every idea that you hold firm comes into question. And I feel like that's where we need to sit, in this place of everything we thought we knew, because we've all been inculcated in this, we have to hold in question so we can get to that dreaming space you're talking about. And so I want to talk about silos before, because the underlying thing I think in your question to me was this idea of when you go ask for help. And we all have very different definitions of what help is, what the outcomes of that health are going to be. Even when you stumbled over my bio, I'm very serious about equitable access to and outcomes from. Because the thing is, everyone focuses on the front door, and all of the systems chop us up like liver and then expect something positive on the back end. So we have to have equitable outcomes. When we're thinking about that definition of help, there's an underlying historical precedent way before the drug war for separating families, Black families, Indigenous families, and this idea of providing culturally, linguistically effective healthcare to anyone wasn't even a question, right? When you were slaves, the idea was you are my product, I own your property. And when you could still have external slave trading, like you died, whatever, I get a new one. When we could no longer do that, when they could no longer do that, then women were essentially used to birth babies. The babies were taken, the separation was just a given, right? Similarly, for indigenous folks, like folks came over and took other people's country, put people in places and said, you belong here. Nope, I'm going to move you here. Nope, I'm going to move you here. I'm going to kill you in the meantime. And so we've always had this underlying, our country was built on surveillance, meanness, and this justification where their definition of my helping you is really about helping themselves. And so whether that be the healthcare system, whether that be the foster care system, I mean, the foster care system, we didn't even get the benefit of foster care. Foster care system originally wasn't about Black or Indigenous people. They're just like, y'all don't know how to parent. I don't care if you know how to parent, we're taking your kids, right? And so our whole country was built on this. And so it was very easy for the drug war to come in. That wasn't something new they thought of or something creative. It's the same way the education system takes us out. It's the same. It's like you have a platform for not wanting people to succeed. And then you put all the other pieces in there, they're not going to succeed. And the worst part is when we start to, like Tulsa, they're like, oh, hell no, we're going to kill you. Right. And so it's really this idea, I think, in the streaming phase, one, we define what help and hope is. We make sure other people understand what we mean by help, because some of it's like, we create these systems. I'm very particular about language, and I'm very particular about saying what we need and what we want, because otherwise other people's assumption usually means we end up poorly. But it really does require taking the time to understand the history of Indigenous people and American descendants of slaves, because otherwise you start to think, well, if I just play by their game, this is going to work out. And I bring you back to Tulsa and some of the other massacres, right?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And that sort of leads into the next question that I have, and that I have thinking a lot about, where if we think about, like you said, Kima, like this idea of seeking help and coercion, or sorry, of seeking help and that functioning for Black and brown bodies as surveillance, coercion, criminalization, and also even backing up further to talk about who defines help, right? And how help has almost always, from the founding of this country, help has been defined and has acted out on Black and brown bodies as a tool of destruction. And so I want to ask, what do we miss if we're only talking about the drug war? And tossing this to you, Chanel, and to you, Kima, to get us started, what about the inherent design of the medical system made it particularly useful to the drug war as a tool, without any changes or tinkering or whatever, made it primed as a tool of the drug war?
Well, I think it just furthered the medical system as it was built, right? And so thinking about eugenics, experimentation, racial hierarchy, coerced treatment plans, like all of that falls in line with what was the colonial structure of the enslavement of, indigenous people, of African people. And that just, it doesn't talk about how then OB floors, L&Ds, even pediatric visits, right? Because we don't think about that either, right? But even pediatric visits, how they become gateways to criminalization, right? Healthcare becomes, and these medical institutions often become conditions of care based on compliance with state goals, right? So if the state goal is power and control, if it is sterilization under the guise of family planning, right? And you see the air quote, right? Under the guise of family planning, then we understand that there's like no really neutral ground, right? The overall arching goal of the system is to punish. It is not to heal. It's not a site of health and healing. It is not a site of bodily autonomy. It is not a site of one of the most cherished moments that someone should be feeling like they're being ushered into, right? Where it becomes a system that dehumanizes and discredits individuals. It discredits their ways of being, their cultural identity, and how they're able to show up. And it criminalizes, your Blackness, your indigeneity, your disability, your educational level, your type of insurance that you have, right? Or don't have, or in between insurances, right? And so it then becomes what, with Kima said, which is like, where does the equity come in at, right? And it's not just the equity of having a healthy child and a healthy parent, right? But it's also about how did that person feel after that they have had that experience, right? Did they feel like they were affirmed? Did they feel like they had the things that they needed? Are they able now to parent in a way that centers them and their family in meaningful ways? Because how people are treated at the site of pregnancy also, lays the groundwork for mental health, for the ways in which parent-child relationship continues to be fostered. So it's it's an intentional system that is created to harm, right? And it's really us, who are working, I think, from an abolitionist framework to decolonize those frameworks, to continue to decolonize birth, with the understanding that when we have, and we continue to. So I think also within talking about the history, there have been outside ways in which we have always tried to center ourselves, but when we have done those things, they have been intentionally deconstructed, right? By force, by violence, by using, oppressive forces.
And I want to add two things to that. One is shorthand. Absolutely agree with everything Chanel says. And I want to make sure we always remember, or I find myself always reminding people that I'm more than a uterus in my infants, right? So this system also has to make us whole, our infant whole, the dyad, the family as we define it. But we often get lost and become vessels and get lost in the conversation. Then you're like half dead on the street. And they're like, oh, worry about the baby. And I think it's important not to forget that we're more than that. And that is wicked important in this particular space, because even if we were not criminalizing people for substance use, we still dying. Because the healthcare system has a massive maternal child health inequities. The healthcare system has inequities writ large, whether that be hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, all of the things. And so it goes, and I am not a history major, but I do love history. And it really goes back to, again, to the creation of the healthcare system. It wasn't about us. Even when Black folks are like, we are going to create medical schools, we're going to create ways to improve our outcomes, and only in certain places, right? Because folks wouldn't see us, but in certain places we did affect medical schools, providers, etc. Then we had the Flexner Report, which is this report to come in to improve medicine, just like we had the Townsend Shepard Act that came in and improved nursing and got rid of all the granny midwives, right? They always do the improvements, come in, and we only had 2 medical schools left. And they said, in fact, maybe we shouldn't teach medicine. What we should teach is hygiene for Black people. So built into the healthcare system is this absolute fact you're going to have inequities. The only way, and I can tweak with the best of them. I worked in the Hill, but the only way we're going to get to equitable outcomes is if we burn it down and say, how do we create systems that center us and our wholeness from 0 to, ideally we stop dying at 55, right? 0 to 90, so that we can be well, our children can be well, our children can be well before they start having babies or decide to have an abortion or decide to have these other pieces. But our healthcare system hasn't. And even when they desegregate it, right, because of Medicaid and Medicare, I know nobody cares about this history, but it's actually different. But when they desegregate it and they said, okay, now Medicare, in order to get Medicare, you have to take all the clients. What happened is the white hospitals took the clients from Black hospitals that were offering cultural linguistically effective care, didn't take the providers doing it, and then are like, oh my gosh, the outcomes aren't as good. Oh my gosh, right? And we still have that same legacy. And so it's really, and now we're back. We can't have diversity of doctors because of the Supreme Court. And I need to have some conversations with lawyers because it seems like they're the only stopgaps right now. But we can't have, like there's this other ruling that's coming out that really will affect this disparate impact, whether that matters. And that is the whole key, right? These systems have been created to make sure that we die. And now they're saying, disparate impact won't matter. There's real systems in place, again, needing to break the silos so that we can reconstruct these systems in ways, deconstruct and reconstruct them so that we're not buying into their language and their jargon and their desire for what our outcomes should be, but what ours are. And when we do this, it's not just Black people, right? It's that canary in the coal mine. If we create systems that are culturally and linguistically not effective. No one size fits all. Everyone actually can improve their outcomes. And so it's that I worked once with a group called Racial Justice Action Center. It's a group that in Atlanta that was really focused on trans women and decriminalizing. And they're like, if you take us the lowest boat and lift the lowest boat, everyone's breathing. And that's where we need to get to.
If I can just pop on to the end of that, because I think one of the things that keeps happening to interrupt all of the efforts that you're talking about, Kima, is that they find new ways to criminalize people to make it impossible, right? So as Miriam
But
knows,
we're
in New York,
smarter than them, Karen.
sorry,
We're smarter than them.
we are
We're
always
gonna
smarter than them, but we are not resourced like them, and we do not
Yes.
have the power of the
Yes.
state to inflict
Amen.
violence to
Amen.
forward what
Not
we want to
mean.
get done, right? And so
And not mean and hostile. Yeah, you're right. You're
So
right.
what do you do when you're in New York City and you are a man whose partner is pregnant and you are getting threatened by the state to have your kids taken away because you failed to control her behavior during pregnancy because she's using? Like, what do you do with that? What do you do when you are a mother in
We-
Louisiana and you are you're being facing
Yes, and
felony
that's not preach.
charges?
But this is why we need to break silos so that we all can stand against that. And similarly, what do you do when the mom comes in and she has breast cancer and she can't afford it and there's liquid coming out? And so she has sanitary napkins in her bra and she says, and she can't even afford those. And she's like, I need to find a place for my child. And the only place that can take it is the foster care system because we don't have health care. And so I'm going to die. Like we all have to break the silos to come together because now that kid's fucked. Like, I mean, they lost their parent and they're going through the God-forsaken foster care system. So you're absolutely right. I'm not saying this is easy, but that's what I think is the point of breaking silos, where we all come together to disrupt these systems.
And I think that when we're talking about it, we need to talk about it from a practical point of view of like what's realistic, right? And understanding like, there has always been a concerted effort through midwifery practices, through, community-based models of care, through, centering birthing centers by trying to have, home birth be more accessible to folks so that they don't have to continue to, have these lived experiences in these systems, but understanding too, what do we do when we know that everyone is not going to have access to that, right? What are we going to do when we know that there's a concerted effort to criminalize midwifery? There is a concerted effort to not invest in community-based programs that we know have the infrastructure and have all of the things that they said they need with the bells and whistles, the data, the capacity and all that to really center our communities, but that infrastructure is being continuously being chipped away, right? Either through now federal funding, through, the weaponization of DEI, right? We have to, so when I hear oftentimes like we need to burn it to the ground, I think it's a burn it to the ground, yes. And while you're doing that, while you're doing that, I need us all to collectively like be working to establish frameworks where we understand like, it's like this double-edged sword for me as someone who is also a doula, where, I know the harms that people are going to walk into. I have even said, listen, when you walk through the door, this could potentially happen. And you know what? Let's have Miriam on speed dial so that when this goes down, you have already had, the conversation. You have already set up your safety net plan and all of the things. And still the things are unavoidable because of the fact that you're in a state of harm, right? That birth has now become a site of criminalization on a consistent basis. And when you bring in partners into the play, like you'll have that partner who, the court will then put it against him and say, well, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? But also when he's there, he's being criminalized. He's having a police on him and being escorted out of the hospital. You know what I mean? He's being seen as aggressive. He's being seen as someone who is not standing up for his family, right? And then there's this like, dehumanization of that. And so like, it's like this very, I don't know, this thing where like they're coming at you at every single angle, trying to find ways to dehumanize us individually, but also collectively. And so like the de-siloing is also, for me, a concerted effort for us to rehumanize ourselves, right? because they are trying to dehumanize us by centering this framework of independence, of individuality, of like not centering community care frameworks. Like let's just chip away at all of it, even as right now. You know what I mean? Like me coming into this, like I'm like my brain is tired. And I think that there's a concerted effort to make us, so tired that we don't want to talk about it, right? We don't want to center frameworks. And it's just punishing people for the conditions that they are living under, just trying to survive and thrive.
And I'm just
But
thinking,
actually,
Chanel,
you go
sorry,
for
I'm
it.
just thinking about that family in Texas who were like, okay, we are not going to go into the medical system. We are going to have our baby at home. We are going to have a Black midwife. We are going to
Yep.
create all of the support that we need to do this thing.
Come on, say
And
it.
then their baby has
Yep.
jaundice.
Yep.
And they also were like, we know how to handle this, but we
Yes.
are going to do this little moment of
Listen,
reporting. And what happens? What
Right.
happens immediately? This baby gets taken away. But
yourself.
they're
Yes.
suing.
Yes.
They're suing the
Yep.
state. And so look, we all have the thing, we all have the path that we need to be on in this moment, right? We all have our paths, but we all need to be working together on those paths to make sure that we can step forward when someone else needs to step back. I'm not saying anything anyone doesn't know already, but like we have the resources that we have now are profound. And they're also the ones that we know have worked for centuries and centuries under this hostile, violent, death-obsessed culture that we live in. So I feel like there's hope there in what we are capable of doing, because in this mind meld that we get to start exercising, we are able to push some things forward because we have eyes on each other. And today, I think we are actually more resourced than I think we've ever been in the history of this country. And I don't think that can be broken.
Well, and I often get this resistance, but it is both and. We do have to, they are burning it down. Let me rephrase, right? Like we always say we can't, they're burning it. And so it is our goal, and I absolutely see, like I've saved lives on a one-on-one level, and I know that's wicked important. But we also have to say what we want the system to be, because when they burn it down, as they are, we better have something to put in place that's going to save our lives and have those equitable outcomes, right?
Yes.
The way that we can do that is, as Karen says, coming together, because this is my reproductive space is one piece of my life. You got your butt kicked up to this, you're getting your butt kicked after it. You're absolutely right. Your significant others are having their butt kicked. Like, how can we create wellness, which I think is broader than healthcare, and healthcare has never learned or never appreciated, which is why you don't have midwives and doulas and others. I think it's an opportunity, as Karen says, we're walking our paths, to tie those paths together so that we can recreate what we want to see after they've burnt it down. And it does require us, then it doesn't mean you're doing everything, right? You're knitting those paths together, and I'm helping Karen's helping me, but also convincing people to walk on the path with us. So when we dream and create this new world, because I'm taking it back, we're creating a new world. It's what we want to see, right? And we have our people with us, and they're not too exhausted, and they're loved, and it's kind.
And I think that like really where we are right now in the conversation really speaks to the reproductive justice framework. It is clear that it is intersectional. It is clear that there is no reproductive justice if we don't have good housing, if we don't have access to jobs to be able to feed ourselves, if we don't have healthy neighborhoods, if we don't have good schools for our children. Like the reproductive justice framework is so powerful because it is expansive, because it demands that we focus, like you said, Kima, on that lowest vote, and know that if there are people who are struggling, who are suffering, who are pushed to the margins, and if they are not our concern, that's not reproductive justice. And so to put a fine point on it, I want to ask and sort of have a conversation about why do we have to understand pregnancy criminalization, and especially the criminalization of people who use drugs, as an attack on all of us? And how have we seen, the narrative is around, I think, Karen, you said this in the beginning, oh, the baby, oh, the fetus, and it frames it as a narrow sort of issue, and that's intentional. But why is it imperative that we resist that narrowing and understand that this is an intersectional issue?
Yeah, and let me tell you, I am new to this space. I come here from a more criminal defense background and looking at prosecutorial misconduct and police misconduct cases. So that when I came into this space, that was the lens I was working with. And I assumed that there were going to be some really clear overlap and that everybody was on that page with me. And you know what? It's not I got to be honest. It's not necessarily how people are rolling in the reproductive justice space. But I feel like the foundational questions for me about reproductive justice come down to a question of body autonomy. And for me, when it comes to criminalization, that is a question of whether or not we are going to fight back loudly around giving a fertilized egg or an embryo or a fetus equal rights as everybody who is watching this right now. And the reason that is important is if we get to the point where a fertilized egg is a child that the state has an interest in, what that means is the state will then have the ability to take over your body from the minute that egg is fertilized, for any reason that they think is in the best interest of the child, which could be that you live in Mississippi and the sewage water is coming out of your tap, which could mean that your child has been forced to go work at a meat processing plant at 14 on the line. There are so many different ways in which what is in the interest of the child can be twisted and turned into some excuse for the state to take over your body. And that, for me, is a racial justice question, because as Kima pointed out before, this is not hyperbolic. This is not us making up. That could never happen. It happened in these United States of America, where a Black woman's body was only a vessel for wealth for her enslaver. That happened. There were people who got together and were like, that is a big man and that is a big woman, force them to have sex and let me watch so that they can breed. Right? That is my property. So the minute that door is opened legally, it is not going to go well for people of color in this country. And we are kind of standing at the precipice of this. This year alone, there were 14 states. Now, this used to be a fringe, crazy idea that even the far right would be like, we're not going there with you. But this year, 14 bills across the United States have been introduced, got out of committee to make abortion a homicide. Okay, so if you have an abortion, you will be subject to the laws that are tied to homicide, which in 9 of those states is the death penalty. We know that the death penalty is so racially disparate. All of these issues are only going to track what has been happening for 300, 400 years in this country. And that, for me, is deeply scary and deeply disturbing, because they're also trying to take away birthright citizenship, how they are creating this world of fetal personhood and also trying to take away birthright citizenship people. I don't know how they're going to square that circle. But what I want, people to really understand is this is very much not just a question of like white women of privilege. And even though sometimes that is discussed in this way, the issues that are justifying and defining where we are at pregnancy criminalization are issues that are very old and intractable when it comes to questions of racial equity in this country. And these are places that are not divisible. And so my work, when I'm doing pregnancy criminalization cases, I do not separate those two ideas one from the other.
I think too, it's also about understanding that, when I talk to folks who are pregnant, it's never just about just the pregnancy, right? And that just fully encompasses, it's never about just the episode of gestation, right? It's about what's happening with the whole person, right? It's never just about the diagnosis of pregnancy. It's about how are the things that are socially happening and environmentally happening and spiritually and emotionally happening, affecting the person, the individual who is gestating this other, right? And when to your point, I think, it's even when we look at our current political spectrum, right? People looked at where we are now in this lens of like, well, that's not going to affect me. That don't have nothing to do with me. That's what's happening over there, right? Like, oh, they talking about them black folks. Oh, they're talking about them undocumented people. Well, I'm not undocumented, right? And so like they're putting people in buckets, which is perpetually causing the silos and making people think, well, I'm gonna be safe in my silo, in my bubble, right? And not understanding how all of these silos are interconnected and how we're all looped in. And when we look at pregnancy, how, as you said, it then becomes a place where if you're pregnant, you're no longer a full person. You're just a vessel of the state. That's it. You are just there. And I mean, and we need to think about that too, just in the ways in which in one breath you're saying, have more babies, have more babies, have more babies, have more babies. Well, actually, not you. I don't want you to have more babies. I want you over there to have the more babies. Right?
But there are two lanes though on that, right? Because I think this is where the things start to both diverge and come together again. I think this is where we do need to do a little bit of the, okay, well, let's talk about reproductive justice in this kind of much more holistic way. Because here's the thing, it's still the fetal personhood question. It's just that white women are expected to continue to have white babies so that the white race doesn't have to worry about white demographics, right? So they have a different path that they're on why these things are happening. We are in end stage capitalism. And at the end of the day, what is supposed to be happening is that workers are supposed to be bred. And as we know, that is what our cultural fiscal role has long been in the United States, is to be the worker, right? And so that is our role. So the more babies with Black folks is that, but even there, and sorry, I'm going to just put my tiny little tinfoil hat on for a second. But one thing that I have always been worried about is the more of the carceral response to pregnancy, the more that we see this ease with which the state can justify that carceral response and criminalization of pregnancy, the more people are sluiced into jails and prisons. And then you don't even need to break anything to justify slavery because the 13th is still with us.
Yep.
Right? So all you have to do is get more bodies into jail, and then you don't even have to do a heavy lift.
Yeah. I also think we as advocates play a role in the problem and can be a role in the solution. So in healthcare, maternal child health space, no one wants to talk about pregnant people who are using drugs. It's like, oh, that's too hard. It's too stigmatized. Right? It's like, so you're killing people willfully, right? People in the drug policy realm often don't want to talk about healthcare. Well, I often tell people, you might save that life with naloxone, but won't you be sad when the person dies of colon cancer 2 days later? Because you actually don't know how to save that, right? And then people in the criminal legal system are often like, pregnant women, we should focus on men, we shouldn't talk about, right? Or it's criminal, or it's drug policy reform only for those who have done no harm to anyone as defined by whoever does that particular law in the moment, right? We have to center, I think the pregnant and parenting person who uses drugs is key, is again, that lowest vote, because everyone willfully can ignore them and shift them into whatever sinking boat that comes along, and they're just drowning. And no one wants to claim that we need to work, well, except out of this conversation, claim we need to work together because they can't drown anymore. That's fun. That's right. But it's really sneaky, and add in like the Roe v. Wade, the pro-choice people who are really focused on just abort, like no comments about pregnant parenting people who use drugs. So it's just, you're caught in this place where you can be past the next person to be criminalized. That's the next, past the next. And we don't come together to say no.
Yeah, and I think just adding on to that point, I think that the particular focus and understanding that centering folks who are pregnant and using drugs is imperative for all of us, in part is because a lot of us hold those narratives very firm around people who are pregnant and using drugs. And especially if you are pregnant and using drugs and treatment has been made available to you and you have not availed yourself. If all of us are really honest with ourselves, we too hold the judgment, and we too are very comfortable with being in our silos and saying, well, that's not me. And at least they had some support offered to them, right? And so I think it's not just like we talk about state violence, we talk about state imperatives, but I think we also have to really be honest with how much we have embodied and internalized narratives around pregnant people who use drugs, and how much we've internalized some of the key features of the medical system that we say made it primed to be a tool of the war on drugs. We also embody those. The idea that we should have autonomy and dominion over pregnant people, especially pregnant people who are using drugs, that everyone else knows best, that is everybody's business, what's happening in that pregnant person's body, in their pregnancy, in their communities, in their homes. Like, these are all, I think, notions that are very firmly rooted in all of us. They're very carceral notions. And so focusing, really sort of disentangling that, not just from what is the state imposing on us, but what are we imposing on each other? And before we can walk together, we have to really be working to disentangle these own views that we're holding ourselves.
Can I ask how folks think? Look, forget the questions, Miriam. We're just off.
I know, we're gone.
No, I was gonna just say, I think it goes back to Kima's quote, you know what I mean? Like, about learned behaviors, right? And I think also it just takes a level of, you know, people throw around, and it's not so that popular, I don't think that much now, but mindfulness, right? And that level of mindfulness of how we're approaching a situation, right? That level of consciousness and our awareness of like how we too have been colonized, right? And even and how is our colonization showing up, right? Even us in this space, right? Because this is also like, we could say like, okay, who are the people who are on this call, right? And are the people who are on a substance, have they had a voice to be able to express where they are, where they stand, what it actually looks like, how systems should be built? You know, like, are they active participants in the decolonization and the restructuring of frameworks, right? That creates alternatives to punishment, that is like building a strategy for hope and healing, that is moving away from like isolated care to community care centered frameworks, that is ongoing and ever evolving too. Because I think sometimes like we figure like it's going to be like, we had this conversation and this is what can be done, and then we don't realize like, no, as the system continues to evolve, you know, and it picks up the things that we're doing, like the conversation that they're listening to all of this, right? And so like, and they're reframing the ways in which they are putting an effort to attack, right? So then what does it mean for us to continuously evolve in how we are adapting to serving? Because we're servants, right? We're servants of the community. How are we being good servants to the community in a way that is humanizing ourselves while also humanizing the next person who is perpetually using drugs? And to your comment before, Karen, you know, as a mom of 6, I know the fears of taking my child to an emergency room.
Yeah.
Right? And being a Black woman, and, you know, like, so, you know, what did you give the child? Well, you're breastfeeding? What are you taking? You know, and then like even knowing the structure, knowing all of the things, and then having to call human rights lawyers that I know to be on the phone with me, right? To say like, this is what's going on. I need you to hear all of this that's happening because I know what they're trying to do, right? Or me purposely removing my husband out of an equation because I know that his presence in a room could potentially cause more harm than good when he's just trying to center his family. And so we got to talk about like all of these things. So like, as you said, like all of it is interconnected. All of it, you know, is not separate. You know, just and to your point, Miriam, about, you know, are we judging in our biases? I don't know how many times I train doulas and I talk about folks who are using marijuana during pregnancy, right? For whatever reason. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe they have bipolar disorder, whatever the case may be. Maybe they need to relax, right? And how it's automatically, how could you?
Yep.
You know, and this is the person who supposedly is like the advocate, the activist, the one who's so evolved, who has a reproductive justice framework, but who is quick to judge someone, right, based on this perception of how, again, what's been ingrained in us, that colonization of a system, right, of how we're supposed to function in society, of what's right and what's wrong.
And
I don't want to get off this.
the stressful part of that, I mean, there's so many stressful parts of that. It's like we have systems that offer support for people as they ask for it. Like women of certain persuasion with cash, etc., if they use alcohol, there are systems in place. They keep their infant, they get the support for fetal alcohol syndrome. Two, there are a lot, like because of the way research is, we do not test drugs often on pregnant people. I'm not talking drugs as an illicit drug. I'm talking like your seizure medicine or your Tylenol, your like medications. The medications that cause poor outcomes in infants. We provide the supports they need, the early intervention. I mean, not if you're Black and poor, but for other people, the early intervention, the making sure you have the support systems you need, the, vents, the whatever. We know how to do this. I just find it fascinating. Often, Chanel used marijuana. I'm not saying, I'm not going to be one of those people, no drug has ever caused an impact in an infant, right? Sure. I actually don't care. What we need to do on the back end is offer the support folks need, as we do for the support that people identify they need, not the support we identify they need, the support people identify they need, as we do for so many other, because there's things that cause, and like alcohol and nicotine, the worst outcomes for infants, and they're still completely viable. Well, they go on to have full lives, congenital syphilis, like all these things. And it's this particular space that we have identified because of the drug war. And even the longstanding drug war was really, again, about that economic work piece. Early on with the opioid dens in California, they used drugs because they're like, yeah, well, you built the railroad, now you got to go, or you might take jobs from white people, right? That's why. And then we got to Chinese Exclusion Act. Same thing with marijuana. And so these all are built in. The drugs are just, it's a tool. We pretend we care about, we never cared about kids. I'm going to give you a list of ways we don't care about kids. So let's not start pretending now. It's just fascinating. And so all of us, as Chanel said, need to get that drug stuff out of it because it's not even factually real. And I know that we don't deal in facts these days, but still, it's not even factually real.
Yeah. And I think we have identified so many of the rotten roots. And the rotten roots that go all the way back, like you said, Kima and Karen and Chanel, to the founding of this country. I mean, the thing about it is these are tools that are not unfamiliar to us. And in the way the system that's have always been attacking us has been evolving, but they also stay consistent with their playbook. And so reckoning with that. And so what I want to do is I want to ask, and really loving what you said, Chanel, about like, how are we constantly evolving? And I think the only way that we are constantly evolving is if we are dreaming and we are clear about what our abolition dreamscape looks like. And to that end, I do want to honor and lift up Dinah and share some of the words that Dinah named about the abolition dreamscape. And Dinah named that it looks like us being able to lean on our own supports and to be able to make decisions that are right for our families within our families without invasions of systems, without fear of being incarcerated or being thrown away or having our children taken. It looks like medical professionals respecting us, our decisions, our voice, and supporting us in every aspect and not imposing their morals and their values. And whatever decisions we're making for our families are respected. And then in true reproductive justice form, Dinah named that it looks like accessing funds, stable housing, and employment. All of the things that anyone would name are necessary for families to live and thrive. That abolition dreamscape is fundamental for folks who are using drugs, and just as much as it's fundamental for pregnant people and parents who use drugs, it's fundamental to all of us. So I want to turn it to y'all and ask to sort of expand on that framework that Dinah has offered us. And again, sending our love and thoughts to Dinah. what do y'all name as our abolition dreamscape? And because our discussions are robust, I'm gonna throw in the other question too. How can we be living abolition right now? So what is our dream and how do we work towards it right now?
I guess I can go. So I think essentially it's where care is not conditional. You know, it's free from coercion, control, from the possibility of being in a cage. It's defined by the people. It's not defined by the state. You know, it is fully resourced for us to be able to care for one another in a loving and affirming way. But it's also accountability to one another, right? So accountability to self, accountability to others. Um, it's um, it's an end to reproductive gatekeeping. And I mean that on two different levels, right? And so like I mean it from a systemic level where we're talking about birth, abortion, sterilization, adoption, right? And all of that, but also reproductive gatekeeping where it comes to us as advocates and and activists within the space, right? Making sure that we're being super intentional about de-siloing the work that we're doing, making sure that we're calling in community-based frameworks, right? Making sure that we're also intentional about creating space for others with lived experiences on a continuous basis to inform our work, because we also too can get caught up in the traps of the cycle, right? And it's intergenerational healing and power, right? And so somebody said in the chat, they were talking about how providers have been left without resources for so long. And I want to, as someone who I work with medical residents and others, creating space for them in a space where oftentimes as advocates, I realized that we were doing it from a patient-centered perspective and what patients needs. And then we're bringing that tool, patients are bringing those tools into these hospitals and these places, and providers are not knowing what to do with them. Right? Providers are saying, well, like, I want to work from an RJ perspective, but I don't know what that actually looks like in real time because I've been indoctrinated into a model of care that has not allowed me the freedom to think, even to like know that that could be a possibility, right? Even though I may have read all of the things, the medical apartheid, I've done all of this, the implicit bias trainings, I've tried to restructure and reframe my center. I still don't know what that looks like because I now have trauma that has now become normalized behavior, right? And so I can't even tell what is right and what is wrong anymore. I also, when there comes a form of accountability, it's accountability from a medical standpoint of I did this, and this based on a medical model of care that was taught to me. But no one ever asked me in that run through or in that debrief, but how did it affect me as the individual who was in the room and or providing the care to someone, right? And so like creating space for providers to also be humanized within the framework so that they can feel like they also have the space to care for people in meaningful ways, right? Even when they don't know, they may not know how to do that, right? And having grace and patience with one another as we go through this, because I think it's going to take a level of grace and patience for us to understand that we may not understand what somebody is experiencing as they're going through this deconstruction and healing, and reconciliation of care.
And I would just say that, the legal profession is having a moment right now because it's melting down in some ways. We don't know if the rule of law is going to be the rule of law in 2 years from now. But I went to law school because, as someone who was an activist during the height of the AIDS crisis, I was like, I think there is some way there that I can make some real tangible change for people that is important to me. And it is the tool that I think I can use. And I deeply believe in the idea of creating a more perfect union. Like, I believe that this system belongs to me as much as it belongs to anybody else, and that I am going to bend it if it will not bend until it begins to work for us. And so I'm trying to really I want to come away with a marching order today, Miriam. Like we're talking about these things. What is the dreaming? But I want this dreaming to have something tangible for me to do. And so what I'm hearing from Chanel, what I'm hearing from Kima, what people are writing about, what I think we need to figure out is how to unmoor the kind of trauma and the damage that we are all seeing and maybe experiencing and maybe trying to translate and understand how to make the law account for that and how to make the law not continue that, if that makes sense. So it's one thing to get a great opinion. It's another thing to bring that opinion into another space that might actually be actionable and that might actually bring change, or that will position us in a way that we can be louder about the change that we make. Because it's an incremental thing for the most part, right? That all due speed of Brown, we still never got there. So I want to make sure that whatever we are doing now is actionable. And I also want to make sure that if we are burning things down, I'm trying to figure out how to be the phoenix. So whatever we now build next, whatever our next is going to be, that it is the next that we want. It's not going to be some incremental thing that we're just walking incrementally in some direction that no one knows what direction we're going into. The next thing has to be the dream. Whatever comes from that ashes has to be this dreaming made flesh. And so I feel like my path is to make it flesh in the law, but I'm not doing little swings. When the legal strategies, the creativity, the ways I'm trying to think about this is to swing all the way out to make this world that I think the law can bring into being.
Yeah, I think that's right. I hear that, and I think it's all of that. And I think one of the ways that we bend the law to our will, and demand that these ideas of liberty and all these other, I can't even name them because I don't even know, because they've never applied to us, but actually apply to us, is first we have to show up for each other in community and shift how we are showing up every day for each other in community. And so again, I want to just circle back and lift up some words of Dinah, and we talk about, I think that the balance of, to your point, Karen, of incremental, but moving in a direction where it's like, is this actually a liberated direction for us, versus incremental and moving towards liberation? And one of the very small things that we can do, that Dinah named, right, is to start with language of how we talk to and talk about and frame people who use substances, most especially pregnant people who use substances. And what Dinah named is that goes to the part of the understanding that we have been brainwashed. And the thought pattern is embedded in us, right? So if we are using words like addict or addiction, or calling people out of their names, like quote unquote crackhead, like we are not only perpetuating this really strongly held narrative that is used to coerce and be violent towards us by the state, but also towards each other. And I think the other part that really resonated with me, and that I think about, is what are the really sort of brilliant and magical, not perfect, because nothing's perfect, but ways that we're living abolition right now. And so thinking about some of the ethics around harm reduction, right? And one of the things that Dinah named when she was talking about harm reduction is the fact that it's a model for every aspect of our life. And that a lot of times we're living harm reduction, we just don't call it that, right? And that thinking about an ethic around how we support people, where it's like, if you have no relationship with someone, you trying to jump in to tell them what they need to do is not support. Support is reciprocity. Support is building trust and relationship with each other. You trying to jump into and to be clear, if someone is experiencing acute crisis, that doesn't mean look away. But it also doesn't mean you're going to tell them about themselves and all the next steps that they need to take, because you don't know them like that. And that's not support, that's domination. And I think I saw, Chanel, you said in the chat, the way to use policy to name the harm, but also build outside of that, and would love for you to, and that centers accountability. And I think all of us in our different careers and have used and worked with policy and tried to think about how to use it ethically. And so just want to, I know we have a few more minutes until we go to the Q&A, so I just wanted to have you all jump in on that last piece.
I don't want to dream too big, but I also think that trust piece is each of us in our spaces. We have been to this place where we've been pitted against each other for money, pitted against each other for names, pitted against each other for all the things. And it's letting go of that colonial pattern in order to work together. But it's really centering love for ourselves and others. Like, one of the things I'm getting better at is saying no, which sounds pathetic, but it's really sadly necessary in my existence so I can make time for joy. But also saying yes to things that are really thoughtful and going to be helpful. Because I, like Karen, I really am planning for, like, I work in the healthcare space. We are in deep shit. They are burning it down. So I am the one who's like, I am working to say what it's going to look like and who we need to partner with, and towards a well-being space, not just a healthcare space. But that really requires us to care for each other, care for ourselves and each other. And we don't. We always talk about, we're going to care for community. We're going to do, like, we have to care for each other. And sometimes, let's be honest, community can cannibalize each other. Because I too was brought up in the HIV days, and often it was like heavy drug users versus men who sleep with men versus, and the preachers, and ish got ugly, right? And so it's learning to love one another, see one another. We don't have to be best friends, but I need not trample you in your rights. And that's going to take some time.
Any final thoughts? Anybody want to, in 2 minutes, take on the way we can sort of ethically use policy as a tool of organizing and building, and also to try and move towards that vision of liberation? 2 minutes, easy task.
2 minutes? I don't know about that. I usually teach a whole semester. I think essentially it starts from, and I'm just going to use one word or two words, be humble. And I know that often it is anti-policy, right? To be humble, because policy is framed in ego. Policy is framed in masculinity. It is framed in this sense of like domination and control and authoritarianism in some sense, right? But what I have learned in the policy space is that to morally and ethically move within a space that where the foundation of it is not moral or ethically responsible, means for us to really be humble in our approach, and to also have grace and understanding with how the frameworks were centered, but also how African and Indigenous people have always had a moral and ethical grounding in the ways in which we have governed over our societies. Now, I know that, again, that is counter what this westernized system looks like. But the more we force that, and the more we push for those values, the more they have no choice but to surface, and for that level of accountability to be at the forefront of everything. And that is what I have seen through example, right? And so, like, even folks who have moved from a quote unquote space where I knew that they were being unethical and were not morally grounded, because of the fact that I stayed, and we all stayed in this particular framework. They had no choice but to fall in line, right? Because now you have a whole center of people who are now, right, pushing forward that same framework, that same idea, that same concept. And that is how we continue, I think, also to humanize ourselves within a space that it looks to dehumanize every single day. And I know that, again, that doesn't fully like encapsulate everything, but that's the only way I know how to put it.
That's it. That's it. That's it. In 2 minutes. Look at that. And I saw you in the chat said you teach ethics of policy. So y'all look out for that course, okay? Because that does need to be the follow-up. So we're going to transition here to some questions. We've gotten some really good questions in the Q&A, and folks, please still add your questions. So one that came up is, how do we support parents dealing with substance abuse or substance use disorder and their children without criminalizing parents?
I think that depends on where you are and at what point you're kind of having interactions, right? So if you are in the midst of labor and delivery, if you've just presented at a hospital, you got to be careful. You just have to be careful, because at the end of the day, 75% of pregnancy justice cases are the outgrowth of a healthcare provider reporting the parent or the child to a family policing organization. So just by asking for the help in the moment of birth can lead to criminalization. That being said, we are trying very hard to equip the field and to make sure that people know what their actual reporting requirements and obligations are. So part of the work that I think is incumbent on us is to figure out how to get that word out in a more effective way, to make people understand that use does not mean harm to a living child, right? Like, it's not, you cannot criminalize people for prenatal behavior to a fetus. What is happening to an actual born baby? And if that baby comes out with high APGAR scores, if that baby comes out and there's no NAS, then what is the problem? Hospital? Do we really need to be there, right? Because we all know that parenting and substance use are not two separate ideas. They can go together. What the help is that people need, we need to give them the help. If there's a healthcare crisis that needs to be addressed, let's address the healthcare crisis. So part of the work I think that we need to figure out is making sure that that message is out to the providers and the people who are supposed to be doing their jobs, doing no harm, providing care, and not relying on carceral or criminalization responses just because drugs are in the picture.
I think we also know, again, we do it for alcohol. And so I think it's also a matter of, as Karen said, educating providers. But what people also have to realize, it's not just the provider, it's systems, right? It's the social worker, it's the front desk person, it's the insurance company, it's all the spaces that things can get ugly. And ultimately, also, it's like, oof, you got out of the hospital, now the pediatrician. Oof, you got out of the hospital, now it's the healthcare system. We need to talk on a broader level, as someone mentioned about mandatory reporting, what that even means and why you should be doing it. People truly believe that there is a that they're supporting people by doing that, right? And so we need to educate them that that's not the case. I'm always like, what makes, if you can find something in the community, what makes you think child welfare is gonna? But I also think we then need to, and Chanel alluded to this, talk to people who use drugs and create the support systems they say they need in the community, so they're culturally linguistically effective, no one size fits all, so they're close by, you have access to without paying for $1 jillion for insurance. They don't keep you from getting a job because you have to go line up for your methadone, right? Like, they actually support you. They allow you to get housing because there's no rules against substance use and housing, because substance use has permeated everything, right? And so I think it's talking to people, creating it, and then funding it. And we know how to do that because we've done that in other spaces. You just have to actually not hate the people you're caring about, and you'd be able to create it in this space.
Yeah, all of that. I think that's right. And I think there's, again, this goes to all of us. It's also how we are showing up for the people in our communities that we know use substances, and really, really, really interrogating that hierarchy of substance use that I think all of us run up against, right? So there is these days with certain people, and not necessarily our folks, but certain people, there's a relative acceptance of perhaps using cannabis during pregnancy. But we're also talking about the folks who are using opioids, and the folks who are using benzodiazepines, and the folks who are using methamphetamines, right? And so really sort of interrogating that and doing that work. And also, I think, being open to and supportive of the conversation of parent, I think there's an idea that, oh, how do we help a person stop using? And that's not always what it's about. And how can we create spaces where folks can use safely, folks can use in their dignity, right? And also parent, because we have that model. We have that model in wealthy neighborhoods of privilege, right? We have the ability to hold that level of complexity for wealthy white parents. Another question that I want to add into the mix is funding for community-based models of care and research are under threat. How do we support each other financially and emotionally to ensure that we can continue moving forward to support families affected by substance use?
I think a quick way is create community giving circles. I mean, honestly, as Kima mentioned earlier, a lot of us are vying for the same pot of funding, and those of us who have been in the maternal health and reproductive health field for a long time know that there was a point where there was like little to no funding, and then there was an oversaturation of funding. It was like, yes. And now it is the restructuring of funding and funding, or funding being rescinded. And so this is where, again, I think a lot of the community care frameworks come in at, and us like building what we need to see. And so like, one, I will say other organizations, this is where the de-siloing happens. If you know that you have the infrastructure for one thing, which may be like communications or technical assistance in one specific area, but another organization is lacking that, well, then how can you lend your time to that? You know what I mean? So that we can build each other up. If you know that you offer mutual aid in one space, but and maybe you have a resource where you can get that collective, that stuff to pass out, and you can share it across lines, do those things. And then financially, if you can contribute, $5 a month, $10 a month to a organization, and it may seem like a small amount, but every amount counts, especially now in a space where funding is being restructured. It is, being pulled in various different ways. State level funding is not necessarily, they don't have places to like reallocate money from other places. And so they're struggling, clinics are closing down. All of these things are happening all at once. And so it's a concerted effort to get us to feel, one, disenfranchised and disillusioned by what's happening, and to keep us separate. So I think those are just easy ways that we can support one another, and build each other up while offering tangible support.
Thank you. And I also want to lift up in the chat, I think a really important point that someone's made, that we have to be really mindful. And this, I think, goes back to supporting parents who are dealing with substance use disorder and their children, mindful of how we are thinking about and categorizing harm. And we think that a lot of times institutions make assumptions, or they make the connection that an infant that's affected by substance use, whether it's neonatal abstinence syndrome, NOWS, or whatever, has been harmed. When in fact, infants are affected by substances under many different circumstances, oftentimes when the substance was prescribed to them, and experiencing neonatal abstinence syndrome as a result of a prescribed drug isn't called child abuse, child neglect. But if a person is using an illicit substance, or a substance that has not been prescribed to them, then it's suddenly that neonatal abstinence syndrome transforms into neglect. So I thought that was really important to lift up, and I think is something that we should all be aware of. And I think we might have, well, maybe I don't think we have time for another question, because we definitely want to lift up our next teach-in, but I want to just turn it to y'all for whatever last words of wisdom, or anything that you have. This has been such an incredible conversation, and I definitely want to give y'all the last word before we share our next teach-in.
I just want people to be in touch. If you see somebody who has been harmed, if they have lost a pregnancy, if they are pregnant, if they have had a stillbirth, a miscarriage, if they're seeking abortion care and they are being in any way criminalized, please get in touch with us. We work nationally. We cover things from murder trials all the way to appellate. We work with other attorneys, but we are in the criminal space all the way up to appellate advocacy. So if you need an attorney, if somebody is being harmed on these bases, I'm sorry, I'm not really helping with a final word, Miriam. I'm just self-promoting our services. But I just do want people to know there is a framework out here, and there are folks who are willing to fight for your rights and to make sure that your family is not being further harmed by the system. So I put my email in this chat a while ago, but maybe Miriam will distribute some things to everybody on this call, and please be in touch with Pregnancy Justice.
You're muted, Kima.
Along those lines, I saw in the chat about over-reporting and providers thinking they have to report. There's a course on that at Doing Right at Birth, Doing Right at Birth, on the Doing Right by Birth website. I'll send you the link, Mary. That's a course that was done by Movement for Family Power, If, When, How, Mishka Turplin, who works with me at Doing Right by Birth, and Sarah Roberts, and is a course about, you think you have to report, you don't actually have to. And here's some of them. Thank you, Lauren. Yay, because someone was on it. But for what to say, I really am absolutely we're taking it back, and we're going to take it back and build back better. And the only way we do that is to work together and to hold each other. And there are times like, it's just too much. Give people the space for it to have the rest, for it to be just too much. And someone else will step up and then step back, because even if we win, we have to all come out of it somewhat whole. And so I really do want us to all hold each other so we get to that end point and win, because it's going to be something.
And I would just say keep centering hope in a framework for hope, right? Continuously. Just in terms of resources, I also left my email in the chat. Ancient Song has a Birth Justice Institute. And so, folks who are interested in, learning more just around policy, there are different pathways that individuals can take in order to just get a full understanding of what it looks like from every lever. And yeah, we have each other. I am continuously hopeful when I get to share spaces with beautiful people who are doing the work. And I just met Kima and Karen for the first time in coming together and doing all of this. And so I just want to say, one, I appreciate you all. Miriam, I appreciate you for being in this work for such a long time and always, stepping up to the plate to center pregnant and parenting individuals. Yeah. Y'all give me hope. And my cancer in me wants to cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm holding it back.
Scorpio here, so
Thank you.
get watery.
Oh gosh. No, but I appreciate you all. And I appreciate the people who are who took the time to be on this, right?
Yes.
To even, engage in the conversation, because that too is important, and it brings more hope, and it de-silos all of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. Thank you to our incredible panelists. Y'all know I love each and every one of you, and I'm excited for the next and next and next. And please join us for the next installment of our 3-part series, Breaking Binaries, Queer Abolitionist Dreamscapes of Bodily Autonomy. This teach-in is an intergenerational world-building session, which will center the wisdom of queer, trans, young people, and parents. In this conversation, we will connect with community experts who are disrupting family policing, building roadmaps to bodily autonomy, and joyfully dreaming a world where we're all free. We dropped the link in the chat, and we will follow up with all of the emails and social media. Again, Chanel, Karen, Kima, thank you so much. Dinah, thank you for your wisdom. I just want to name a lot of the things that I was sharing or things that Dinah and I talked about in prep. And so please look out for her work, and we will share some in our follow-up email. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in June.